Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
Welcome, if you're listening on a Friday, to Feminist Movie Friday, to whatever day you're listening. This is one of those that's very close in line when it comes to being a feminist movie. I would say, do you think this does this pass Bechdel?
I think so.
Bechdel test? Because there's only 4 characters. 4/5/6 and a half. And 2 of those are women. So, the conversation is like, okay. But I think the second one really does hold to like a little more feminist empowerment. This is the setup for it. I don't know about the third one. So much teasing. But before we start, spoiler alert, because I think we're still in that range. Are we still in that range that we had to do spoiler alerts?
When did this come out? It's
2018.
It's 10 years. So
yeah,
yes.
So spoiler alert, if you've not watched this movie, as well as content warning of death, horror, aliens, childbirth. Yeah, some gruesome scenes. And as per usual, we wanted to take some time to talk about a film we enjoyed and now has gotten 2 additions to the Now series, including the newly released A Quiet Place Day 1. So yes, obviously we're talking about A Quiet Place.
Yes.
Point blank. Again, spoilers since it is within that 10-year mark. But if you're a fan of these series or movies like these, I have a feeling you've already seen this. So it's on Paramount Plus. Not a sponsor at this time. So, the 2018 movie A Quiet Place was a huge hit, and it was John Krasinski's first directorial debut. Anney and I had a hilarious exchange where we mixed up 2 movies about John Krasinski, and we're like, what? But we figured it out. But with that, the movie made headlines for several reasons, and one including the fact that they cast an actual deaf actress as one of the main characters, Millicent Simmonds. And Simmonds was celebrated for her incredible acting, as well as leadership in providing help and information to Krasinski and the rest of the team.
Right. Here's a quote from slashfilm.com. A Quiet Place's most revolutionary element is the casting of Millicent Simmonds as Reagan. It's unfortunate that the hiring of an actress with the same disability as her character is considered a rarity, but when barely 5% of disabled characters are written and nearly 100% of them are portrayed by able-bodied actors, it's important to highlight. Simmonds actually taught the cast how to use sign language, and her ability to simply illustrate that her disability is an average part of her life is amazing, creating a character who exists on screen because the actress understands her character off screen. It's another great example of why casting disabled actors is so vital.
Right. Again, they took a lot of advice from her. I hope she got paid extra for teaching and helping with a lot of the content, because apparently she was the one who made suggestions on how to use the sign to show her emotions and all of that. So she got paid.
Yes.
So the film was a hit overall and was critically acclaimed. The movie was nominated for several awards, including Academy Awards and Golden Globes for Best Score and Best Original Screenplay. And it did win others, including the SAG Awards. Emily Blunt won that, and Critics' Choice for Best Sci-Fi Horror Movie, and many others. So we're going to jump right into the plot. You ready? Lego. So the movie begins with a family of 5 walking to get supplies. We are introduced to the Abbotts. Father Lee Abbott, played by John Krasinski. Evelyn, played by Emily Blunt. Marcus, the second child, played by Noah Jupe. Reagan, oldest child, played by Millicent Simmonds, and a brief appearance by the youngest son, Beau. The movie is fairly quiet throughout due to the alien invasion. These creatures are sightless but can hear very well and nearly impossible to kill as they have armor plating that protects them. Feels like aliens. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Their invasion has destroyed the human population, with just a few remaining, including the Abbotts. At the store, they are able to get a good amount of items, and the youngest was even able to find a space shuttle toy, but the parents did not allow him to have it. However, Reagan, being the good sister, gave it to him without the batteries, because this made a lot of noise. However, Beau took those batteries with him. And as they journey back home, Beau turns on his new toy, causing everyone to panic. However, Reagan, who is deaf, did not hear the toy, but watched the reactions of her parents just in time to turn and see her youngest brother taken away by an alien. Dum, dum, dum.
Yeah.
We jump a year later to see that the family has tried to go back to their normal, and that Evelyn is several months pregnant. Throughout this time, they have set up things in order to survive with their soon-to-be infant child. A basement that is somewhat soundproof, a baby box that is soundproof with oxygen when it cries, a distraction for when she actually starts to give birth, and much more. Lee has also been researching ways to fight against the aliens, looking for weaknesses, having surveillance all around, and teaching their son how to survive. At one point, Lee makes Marcus come with him to go fishing and refuses to allow Reagan to come with them, even though she desperately wants to go, saying she needs to stay with her mom to keep her safe. Upset, Reagan decides to go visit Bo's memorial site, instead leaving Evelyn all by her lonesome. And of course, she then goes to labor by herself. After trying to go into the basement, she steps on the giant nail, which made everybody scream and squirm,
Yes.
making her drop a picture frame she had in her hand, alerting all the creatures around. She's able to turn on the lights outside to alert the family that she was in labor, which is one of their precautions. But the alien soon appears in the basement. But Evelyn is able to make it out by tricking the alien with a timer, with an egg timer. After a deep conversation and bonding time between Marcus and Lee, because they're able to talk because of the water, Marcus asks if Lee is mad at Reagan for Bo's death, in which Lee says no, and Marcus advises him to tell Reagan that because she thinks he blames her and is mad at her. Soon upon their return, they see the lights, and Lee runs to lure any other creatures away with fireworks just in time for Evelyn to give birth in a bathtub by herself. Meanwhile, Reagan sees the fireworks and runs back home, while Lee finally gets back into the house and helps Evelyn and their newborn baby into their hiding spot, and Lee soon goes back out to find the other kids. Marcus and Reagan are able to get on top of a corn silo after a chase ensues, and they try to signal their parents with the fire, but Marcus then falls into the corn because of course, why not, which the aliens hear, and after finally being able to get out of the corn silo, both of them run to the truck where they get attacked by the alien. Soon, though, Lee arrives and signs to Reagan that he loves her and has always loved her, important line, before he distracts the animal, sacrificing himself so his children can't escape, which I really don't think he needed to do. I feel like he could have done 10 other things to try to at least survive. I don't get those things. I don't like it. Anyway, the children arrive back home. The hideout is now flooded, and Evelyn and the baby are able to escape, but they are soon still being hunted by the alien. Evelyn and Reagan realize that the hearing aid that Lee had made for Reagan at the beginning of the movie actually hurts the aliens, and they use it to make it vulnerable so that Evelyn can shoot it. The end. It is a pretty bad scene because you see Evelyn doing the my noise sound effects. You like that?
Yes.
And that's where we end.
Yes.
So, obviously, this movie is quite intense for several reasons. One of the ways that they do this is through the communication. And I use this as a theme because we want to talk about the themes now, that communication is a part of what they want to do, whether it's very obviously with the silence throughout the movie, the usage of sign language, obviously, throughout the movie as well. And then just kind of like him never communicating, but then finally communicating with his daughter about what he was feeling and not doing it in a great job right before he dies, though, of course, so why not? So within that, I said silence was a part of the theme. And again, another critic wrote in a different article that it is best watched at the movie theater because when you're with a crowd of people in silence, there's no music, there's no dialogue. It's something different from being at home by yourself, even with surround sound, which is what we have. But, like having that, there's an audible change in the atmosphere and that you're supposed to feel.
Yeah. Well, it's really comical because, I mean, it's incredibly effective. The comical part is I went and saw this in theaters and everyone I know, even my horror movie friends, is like, I would never dare because inevitably my stomach starts a rumbling in the movie. And I'm like, I ball up my jacket over my stomach and I'm trying to, and it was like a packed theater. So, the people next to me definitely were like, it's her. But the wider audience didn't know, but it was. We were dead silent just watching this.
So it sounds like you wouldn't survive.
No,
nobody really talks about those. Yeah, it's like going to use a bathroom, going to what
Right.
happens if you
Right.
have to vomit. Like you're not quiet. Quietly. Like how did Evelyn do this birthing thing?
Oh wow!
But here's a quote from that /film.com article. The high silent concept gives the film a unique aura of suspense. You, like the characters, are constantly flinching at every small noise. It also gives the actors a chance to project emotion without dialogue, which they all clearly relish. Not least Simmonds, a deaf actor who just about steals the film from the putative stars, playing her parents, Evelyn, Emily Blunt, and Lee Krasinski. Which, by the way, Krasinski, that was his whole thing in The Office. Always doing the side eye, always giving the extra looks. So he should have been a pro at this. Like, if anybody should have been prepared for a role, except he's never done it as a fear-based, embarrassment-based, yes. Guilt-based, yes. Like, if you've seen The Office, you know. The American Office, that is, because he makes all those faces. So I feel like this was made for him. But yeah, I feel like the silence was not only a theme, but it was also a character in itself, because if it was broken, everything changed.
It felt very oppressive. It felt very it did make you look for any kind of thing that could make a noise, like, oh, don't knock into that, or don't do that. Like, you were just so constantly looking around for, okay, that could make a noise, that could make a noise. It just made you very aware of how many sounds you make just existing.
Right.
And what would that mean if you had to really eliminate that?
In the new film, we know there's a cat involved, and I constantly have always thought if I was in an apocalypse situation like that, I would die because of my dog.
Yeah. So my friend Marissa, friend of the show, has seen the third one, and she really liked it.
Okay.
I'm planning on seeing it soon. I have seen the sequel.
Yes, they deal with a baby. They do a great job with the mom trying to have a conversation, but then we do have the rebellious teen in this aspect too with the young boy. It's been a minute since I've seen it, and then we have Cillian Murphy, and it's kind of like, huh, what? It's a boat. There's a boat, and there's a whole island alien terrible scene, and a radio station. That's right. They thought they found peace for just a slight second.
Just a second.
Spoilers for that one, especially if you hadn't seen that, y'all. Yeah. It was horrific. I forgot about that. And I was like, huh.
Yeah.
Huh. I think they had to switch it up a little bit. We have to have some talking.
Yeah.
Of course, with that communication, we talked about the use of sign language. I did find it fascinating. Apparently, Simmonds really had a lot of to say about let me do this as a teenager, and my signing is going to be really abrupt and forceful, I'm yelling at you in sign language, and she does a great job in that whole stop, just stop, that level of conversation, with his slow, very big gesture goodbye to her once again. And in the silence, we have them dancing with AirPods. Where do they get the batteries?
I don't know.
As they have electricity somehow.
I'm sure it was in there, probably.
Did I miss it?
Yeah.
Because generators are damn loud, so there's no way.
I've told you about that. My fear in horror movie video games. You start that generator, they're coming for you.
They're coming for you.
Whatever it is.
But yeah, so that was a part of that level of conversation that they got lucky that they were able to all sign really well. And she was talking about how they would need to be fluent, because if they had been living with her as the eldest daughter, they would all be very fluent with it, which I think is a very good point. And so she would teach them pretty steadily to make sure that they were able to do so. And I put this under communication. I think when we talk about sign language, when we talk about actors who are able to be represented, we wanted to talk about the ableism versus representation. And we've seen it too often where we see able-bodied people, as he spoke earlier, being these characters because they have this dynamic that it needs to be fixed. Again, that's not necessarily a thing. That's not a lot of people who are in the disabled community would say, I'm fine. I don't need to be quote unquote fixed. And I put that in like derogatory terms being used essentially when it comes to disabled communities. And so we don't see enough representation like in general, because the idea that is like the catalyst of the plot, which we don't want to see. And that's kind of the nice part of this movie is it's not the plot. It's not the henchpin to this whole thing. There's no, like, it's just who she is. That's just a part of her life. And that's just a part of their life. There's no, the movie's not based on that, quote unquote, you know what I mean?
Right.
So in that, there's a lot of conversation about, did they do well?
Right. I remember when this came out. I remember all the conversation about it. Here's a quote from Brian O'Donnell's article in themighty.com. Krasinski and his writing team are not careless filmmakers, and the way they sidestep this trope is remarkable in its simplicity. They don't call attention to Regan being deaf in the opening scene, so when it does come up, it is only a part of her character and her journey. We already know this character as a smart, capable, but in one fateful moment, careless teenager. The suffering angel only has their condition to offer, which lowers them to a sympathy device. But Regan is much more than that. No one is particularly sympathetic to Regan because she's deaf. The world of the film is so brutal and hostile, Regan being deaf is pretty low on the list of issues facing the Abbott family. Further, her relationship with her family, and specifically her father, Lee, is complicated, and not because she is deaf. It's complicated because she got her brother killed, and Regan and Lee are struggling to navigate this tragedy in a world defined by tragedy.
Right. You know, there's another point that I didn't address necessarily, but in another article, they had this conversation about the fact that the villains in this, the bad guys, the aliens, like many others, are very much disabled representations as well, in that they are blind essentially, can't necessarily communicate, all these things, and like their inability to do A, B, and C, and D. And there's conversation about like you see these tropes, you see these things as the weaknesses and as used against them, but is this an ableist tactic as well that's too often used to make the monsters for these movies? And I was like, I wasn't thinking about that route, but I see. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting conversation that we're not going to follow too into, but it's just something to speak out on. Here's another quote from that /film.com article. The eventual reveal of her as deaf would then compel the audience to question whether this changes how they feel towards the character and whether the use of sign language is connected to her or not. It would have demanded the audience to look at their own stereotypes of disabled characters. Regan's disability is never seen as a detriment in comparison to a mobility issue. Regan is as able-bodied as can be, an additional Hollywood benefit of using deafness in general. Despite her hearing loss, she's portrayed as smart, able to think on her feet, in comparison to her brother Marcus, Noah Jupe. She isn't labeled a victim. Though her malfunctioning implant prevents her from hearing the creatures behind her, her expressions are one of surprise in comparison to Jupe's, whose reactions are strictly based in fear. So there's kind of like the level of like, okay, this just changes the approach for each actor and like what they saw and what you could feel, because they're like, they are. You have the one that's the protective one, the father who wants to defeat it and protect his family. You have the mother who is caring and gentle and trying to make sure everyone is okay and connecting to each other once again, but also like helping everybody through heartbreak. You have the sister who is constantly on alert, but she's not as scared. Like it's not like she is scared, but it's more like she's determined. And then you have the brother who is constantly scared, doesn't want to leave because he knows the bad out there. So I thought that was an interesting look.
Yes. And of course, with most movies and shows, is not completely ableist free. Here's another quote. The film isn't 100% able to divorce itself from ableism. Hollywood likes to fall back on making disabled people magical, either with heightened senses or in their possession of a skill that defeats the baddies. In this case, Regan's broken implant is the monster's weakness her father was searching for. Using the feedback from the implant, Regan neutralizes the monster, making them easier to kill. The concept certainly falls into the trap of being a benefit for her. The one thing she can do is use her disability to save the day. However, her ultimate rejection of the implant allows her to embrace the new world around her, unburden herself of guilt, and become the new leader of the family unit. The movie still falls into ableist thinking, but Simmonds' strength as a performer and the film's disinterest in making her character a disabled unicorn prior to this attempts to balance the scales.
Right. Right. I think that's that conversation. Like, you have to have some type of drama and some type of solutions. And I think inevitably this is the easier pick. It was still creative for like, oh, this is going to affect their hearing because of, these things. Okay. But like, yeah, I think we see that in most times in order to explain away a disability and or to hide it or to overemphasize the point, to the point that like, I'm so accepting of you that you are so, because this is the only thing I see of you because you're so beautiful and makes you unique. You're like, that's not it. So you definitely do have those moments. And it's hard to see sometimes, especially as an able-bodied person, meaning like I've never had any issues with like hearing to that point. So to me, it doesn't like, oh, okay, yeah, of course this might happen, blah, blah, blah. Not seeing it for, oh, this is kind of like one more ableist trope that we haven't looked at in this way, because it seems kind, maybe? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a lot of conversations that came out after COVID, where I was like, I kind of get, this is not the same thing, but similar. I kind of get what you're saying, where people were suddenly like, oh, my superpower is anxiety, and I stay inside all the time. Like, oh, my superpower is this. And I'm like, okay, I get what you're trying to do.
Right.
But, and if, some people feel that way, okay, but if that's kind of like the trope is.
That's something that you're just continuing on to be like, this is what I see about you. It's kind of like that level.
Yeah, like the thing about you is this.
Yeah. Like for most people, they're like, that's not the thing. It's kind of like when I'm being called out for my ethnicity constantly. I'm like, yes, I know. Yeah, I'm Korean. Yeah. That's not the, okay, cool. Like that's the only acknowledgement to the point of like, but you're so beautiful with this. I'm like,
yeah.
You're so lucky to learn sign language. Excuse me. Like there's so many, I've heard that too, y'all. But with that, we're going to move on. We're talking about family. I'm going to put this as a theme because under that is many themes. With their family specifically, we had the loss of a child, which was traumatic at the very jump. So you have trauma after the loss of the child. So you have the trauma of the parent. And there's so many feelings on that one end. And then the siblings, and you have those feelings on that end. Trauma is all about, horror movies just love trauma, though.
I'm starting to think almost everything loves trauma.
That's fair. That's fair.
But yes, horror movies definitely love trauma. They love characters who are wrestling with trauma and have to, in some way or another, come to terms with it. And usually in some way or another, it brings them more harm.
Yes.
That they haven't faced it or haven't dealt with it.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Then we have like rebirth, the new child, the new beginning when they start over again. It did feel like kind of a slight, like, hey, we lost one, we'll make another one. I don't think that's the case at all, but the way that the timing of the movie went, it was a little like, interesting.
I did think the first time I saw this, and I feel you and I have a tendency to do this. I mean, we do it all the time on the show, but I was like, wow, you're going to have a baby right now?
Right.
Because there's the crying. That clearly they put in the thought. They put in the thought of how can we protect this baby if it's crying, all this stuff. But the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that sounds like a risk, my friends.
Right. Right.
Really concerned about this. And I think they put, I'm pretty sure I read about this. They had that birthing scene because they knew it would be so intense of how she's not able to scream. And it's like clearly very painful. She stepped on this nail. Like the tension is just over the top in that. But yeah, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
It felt like a ticking time bomb.
Well, it is, obviously.
Yeah.
Again, it falls into the second movie. But I think it's interesting. Like still like in the midst of this moment, she's still trying to keep our family together while being pregnant. Again, my mind went through everything of like, there's so many complications to pregnancy and dangers to this. You're already probably malnourished. You're probably all these things. If you have morning sickness, you're real screwed. And then you have 2 other kids in this point. Like, there's so much that I'm like, this doesn't quite make sense. A. B. The birth scene. I was like, okay, there that is. How the child didn't, like, typically they scream or they try to get them to start crying to make sure they're breathing and such. None of that happened. Like, I was like, none of that. I guess maybe during the fireworks, that was enough of a distraction. And also, where are these fireworks coming? Like, if you have all of these, they should have been able to survive, is what I've got to say on that one. Again, they're able to rally with each other and help each other out. The sister really does help the brother, and the brother helps the sister in their corn silo, like making sure to protect each other. Of course, another theme, death. During the apocalypse, we're going to have a lot of death. We had the old man come out of nowhere, scream, because he wanted to kill off everybody since his wife or partner died. So he's like, end. Everybody ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we didn't really talk about this, but there is, Lee is trying to find other survivors.
Yes.
He's trying to find other survivors. But it's eerie and alone for all of it.
Yes.
And so it feels like if there are people, there are people like this old guy who might be a danger. It's a real risk to reach out. And it also just, along with the silence, I think it hangs over the whole movie, this fear of death and like the fallout of this death that happened at the beginning and having all these precautions in place to prevent death. And it's just constant, like it's there.
Right.
Yeah.
You're getting sweaty.
I'm like, go away. Ward off this feeling.
Again, with another, like the theme of survival, which they do a great job. I was thinking, like, the amount of corn they have, they can live for a long time. As long as they've got some water.
They really had a pretty good setup.
Yeah, the jarred foods and downstairs. I'm like, where'd y'all get that?
Yes, it's one of those movies that makes me want to learn some things.
Yeah.
But I like, they had a lot of creative solutions to like their pathways, how to muffle their footsteps, and their red light system. Their light system,
yes,
was really striking.
I'm trying to figure out where the electricity is.
Electricity, I'm sure they probably explained it.
I must have missed it, I guess.
Or maybe they didn't. I don't know. I remember somebody wrote it was in good fun, but they were talking about how this alien would actually function, and they're like, no.
All the aliens are starting to look similar to each other. Have you noticed this? Like, he looks very much in like line with Aliens and Stranger Things put together.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I can see that. I think I've seen some different. Well, I guess
I'm trying
it
to think of
depends.
it. Like, ghosts and such are different than like aliens. Or aliens being like mindsets.
Yeah, like the worms that get in your ear. And
oh, no. I was thinking the 3-body problem.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
It's just, they just communicate telepathically and you never see them.
Arrival, they're kind of like squid.
That's a whole... Is that female, like, aliens? We need to talk about those. I'm just kidding. I think we actually did talk about that in Aliens. Yeah, I think we did talk about that. The mother. Anyway, moving on. But yeah, I think there's several other themes we could attach to this. The whole cabin in the woods feel, being in the country. Yeah, so where would you go in an apocalyptic situation?
Well, we have talked about this.
We have.
The unfortunate thing for me is I live in a city. I live very close to the center of a city. And so you've seen a lot of apocalypse movies. I'm in a lot of trouble because of that. Because I basically have to get out of the city. Otherwise, I'm going to be like trapped your car's not going to get out. The roads are going to be blocked.
Right.
So I either
in
have
your car, especially.
Yeah, that's true. Oof. So I either have to get out before things have really gotten sour, or I'm going to have to start walking. I think I would head towards where my mom lives.
Right.
Because the survivalist lives next door.
Right.
And it's pretty secluded, but like not too secluded. So I feel like I could get some stuff. And then from there, maybe I'll learn some skills and I'll move on to somewhere else. I have a couple options in mind. Nothing's settled yet, though, Samantha.
Nothing's settled. We gotta make a plan.
Yeah. Yes. What's your plan?
I don't much have one either. I would go, I think, towards my family as well, who is in North Georgia in the mountains. But still, like, there's no real isolated area.
It would really depend on the apocalypse, too. What kind of apocalypse are we talking about?
What are we looking at?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe they hate the city and I'll be better off there. Whatever.
Maybe it starts out in the country.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like a zombie thing. Probably start in the city. But
go
maybe,
back to the CDC.
Oh, that's got its risk. But
it does, but it's pretty high security.
That's true.
Anyway. We'll think more on this.
Yes.
And I think, like, as we said before, the character of Evelyn is being built up here, especially with the ending frame of her and Reagan being the lead here and obviously finding a way, we can kill these effers, essentially, with this way and having a plan that way. I think it definitely does set up for the next one in which she becomes a little more outspoken, a little more direct, a little more confrontational, especially with the kids and trying to make sure that they survive. It's interesting as that plays out.
It is. And I really like Reagan's story in the second one as well. So it's worth watching, I think. But yeah, listeners, if you have any thoughts on this, any of these movies, please let us know if you have any thoughts about apocalypse survival
plans. What is your plan?
Tips. Let us know. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at MomStuffPodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store. We have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christine, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.